All right, friends, making momentarily here his third appearance on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Noah Rubin coming up in about 30 seconds today. Welcome to the pod. I already said the name. I'm Dan Vespris. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Vespris. You can follow the network at Old Man Squad. Thank you to everybody that has been finding it of late. It's very cool, actually, over the last week and a half or so. How many folks have popped in the comments section or whatever, Twitter, to just be like, Dan, I just found your new thing. Yes, that is probably cooler for me than it is for you guys. So please like, rate, and subscribe. That's what allows it to pop into the feeds, and then everybody sees it, and we create this nice little snowball effect. But you guys don't want to hear about that. You guys want to hear from Mr. Rubin. So let's bring him in here. Appearance number 3, tied for the high among all guests, which means a couple of things. Number one, it means Noah's the man. And number two, it means that I am not just shouting into the void nearly as much as I used to. So Noah, live from a hotel bathroom in the lobby. How you doing, man?
Dan, I'm doing good. Excited to be back. I think it also means a third thing is that I have way too much free time on my hands to be able to have already made 3 appearances on this podcast. But it's always fun whenever we do this. You mentioned I'm in not a hotel lobby bathroom. Just wanted to clarify that just so everybody knows I'm not appearing from a bathroom that maybe isn't watching, but maybe they're listening so they can't actually verify this.
How
But
dare
I am
you?
outside. So it's like the exact opposite of my normal setup. Normally it's in my office with my 2 screens and my air conditioned room. So it's nice and cold. Now I'm out in the sun holding my microphone, 1 screen, and hopefully no bystander noise that interferes with anything. But I think it's good so far.
Yeah, it's great so far. I have additional questions about your setup here, but before that, I want to make sure everybody knows where to find you. He's at Noah Rubin 22. That is on the socials. He is at RotoWorld Basketball. He's at FBI, host of the Tank Me Later podcast. You've been kind enough to have me on that one as well. Check that out. Every place podcasts are found. Again, talking to Noah Rubin here today. We're going to be going through the Yahoo board. Every time I think it's going to change, it doesn't. It's still the same. This morning, I'm sure that when I bug Dan Titus to be like, hey, what happened? He's going to be like, I honestly don't know. But it means that we still have some values. We still have some messes floating around out there. No, before I ask you for your first bust or sleeper or value or whatever, where are you actually? What city are you in?
So I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. It's not far from where
Home of
we
the River
live.
Dogs.
Yes, but it's part of my wife's sales territory. So we come down here once a month and I just work from a hotel lobby or hotel room or wherever I can find that's comfortable. And right now it is outside because it's still gorgeous.
Not hot yet.
This little corner is shaded enough that it's not too hot, but I just meant like it's pretty outside because the sun's outside and it's not cold. It doesn't actually ever get cold here. It's always
Yeah.
warmer still.
To say I don't know a lot about that area, but I know that it's not exactly a frigid zone. All right,
No,
we
it
can
isn't.
pivot to the board. We can talk about the board. That's what the masses want. So Noah, as I've said with other guests that have given me some of their faves and least faves, the steering wheel is in your hands right now. Where do you want to go first? Who do you want to talk about?
Man, I feel like looking at just this initial Yahoo ranks top 25 ish, because I think that's where everybody's a little bit pickier is earlier on. Once you get halfway through, it's like, okay, this guy in this round or around this 2-round range. But when you're at the top, it's like, no, this guy has to go before this guy. I mean, there's a number of guys that I feel like we could talk about, but I guess the first one we could talk about is LeBron. Have you talked about LeBron yet doing this
Not
at all?
really, actually.
Okay.
Surprisingly, he hasn't come up all that much. I feel like to this point, at least, people have been like, yeah, I'm okay with him going where he's generally going. What are your thoughts on the cyborg who's still freaking awesome at almost 40?
Yeah, to me, it's a bit early. I mean, just looking at it, having him at 22, that's a late second round guy. Do I really want to take LeBron at his age? Still, his talent is obviously there. That's not going anywhere as far as I know. But how much is the change of having JJ Redick at head coach? How much is that going to play into it as well? Is he going to kind of run the team more centered on Anthony Davis. I think we've seen that in the brief insight we've kind of gotten into how he wants to run things. Prioritize Anthony Davis a little bit more. Does that mean limiting LeBron's minutes, his games, his usage? I think we could see all of that happening. And I just don't think I feel comfortable drafting LeBron in round 2. I think he's a guy that I might just want to wait and take a round later, like late 3rd round. But I probably would be most comfortable and like feel like it's a good pick early 4th round. And that probably just means I'm not going to get LeBron this year because he's going to go earlier than that in most drafts. But I think that late 2nd round is just a bit early for me, especially just looking at the guys behind him in these rankings, like Scotty Barnes, DeJounte Murray, James Harden, like all of those guys I feel more comfortable with not only playing more games, but also, being a priority on offense and defense for their teams. Maybe not Harden for the defensive part, but DeJounte and Scotty will be able to kind of do things on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, and it's sort of lost in the shuffle on the LeBron thing. This past year, he had his greatest 3-point shooting season of his entire career. Shot 41%. Best for LeBron was 2012 with Miami when he took about a half as many tries at 40.5%. Throughout his entire career, LeBron's a 35% 3-point shooter. Now, what's hard to know there is whether or not that 41% is going to stick. But what that meant because of that is that despite the aging, which still is sort of hard to spot on the offensive side of the floor with LeBron, his effective field goal percent last year was the best he'd had since 2013 with Miami, a freaking decade before. It does, to your credit. No, this is, I think, points that back up what you're saying. Guys that are turning 40 don't usually have their most effective season since the year they were turning 30. That's pretty unusual, although LeBron is pretty unusual. So what are the odds you think that he just continues to defy age and defy gravity? Because, I mean, shit, he did it this year.
I guess, like, if somebody's going to turn 40 and all of a sudden be even better than they were in the past, it's going to be LeBron among anybody to ever exist. That's fair. Maybe like in basketball, we'll say, because there are people in other sports that have done similar things. But like looking at it last year, he played 35 minutes per game, 71 games. Just knowing, and like pretty much everybody listens to or has listened to JJ Redick at some point, whether it be podcast or First Take or anything else. Like, going to take a very analytical approach and is going to try and maximize LeBron for the postseason. The 35 minutes per game is probably the one that I think is just going to go down. Like, I'd be very surprised if it was anywhere near that. So LeBron could still be an incredibly effective player, but only play 30 minutes per game and rest back-to-backs. And, it's a nagging injury. Let's just not play him this game. Like, I don't think JJ Redick is going to put LeBron in a situation where he's going to expend himself during the regular season. Like, there's no way any of them are going to prioritize awards for LeBron at this point. It's going to be about the playoffs. So, yeah, I don't think it's necessarily, which it can still be a factor, is that LeBron is turning 40 and the play is just not going to be as good. And I don't think that's a discredit or an attack on LeBron. Like, it might just happen because he's 40. But I think it's more about how is the team going to use him entering year 40 when they're still trying to win a championship.
Yeah. And another feather in your cap on this one, his 17.9 shots per game last year. That's the lowest for LeBron since 17.6 in also 2013. That was that other extraordinarily efficient season we were just talking about. So it was kind of, last year was an incredible year for Bron. He was number 17 in 9 cap, but it was sort of, I don't want to say a mirage because he's LeBron. And like you said, he could just do it again. But there were all these things that kind of felt like outliers despite a decrease in the overall amount of stuff he was being asked to do. Some of that was because Anthony Davis was very healthy last year. D'Lo got more involved. Reeves got more involved. So all of these things do kind of lend themselves to a LeBron should probably do a little bit less. But then he overcame that by having, again, his most efficient year in a decade last season. That was sort of that weird push and pull that you saw going on. The one thing that I'll do, because basically all the data I've given so far has backed up what you've said, to play devil's advocate for just a moment, there is something safe about LeBron, knowing that, like, if he's on the court, and he might miss time because he's turning 40 this season, but if he's healthy, it's not like he's going to be much worse than like a top 40 guy, right? So at least you're not going to completely detonate your team by drafting LeBron. And there is a certain comfort in that because other guys going around him, like we've seen the roof fall in. JJJ is going like 5 or 6 picks later. We kind of saw the roof fall in on him last year. I don't know if that's going to happen again or whatever, but like, what if one of these guys turns out to be an absolute train wreck? At least you don't have that with LeBron.
Yeah, that's fair. If you're going for a safe pick in the second round where it's, he doesn't have the ceiling of some of the ceiling of some of the other guys around him. Like, I don't expect LeBron to, like you said, be better and have like a first round finish, a top 10 finish. Like, I don't really see that happening. I could see Scotty Barnes, improving this season. He's still very young. I could see DeJounte Murray improving this season. He's going to play a different role with New Orleans than he did with Atlanta. We've seen him finish in the top 10 before. I'm not expecting that, but I could see it potentially happening. James Harden, they just kind of took Paul George out of there, and he has that ceiling because where he is a guy that even if he isn't the same player that he once was, he's still really good for fantasy, and we could definitely see him be even better statistically than he was last season, simply by the fact that they have Kawhi, who's consistently a question mark, like didn't play for Team USA this summer because of they were trying to prioritize his health for the season, but that's still a question mark. Russell Westbrook's gone. So like Harden might just have enough usage where I like him in fantasy better than LeBron.
All right, where do you want to go next? Again, the boat is yours to steer.
Yeah. Just kind of looking down the board, or you know what? Actually, I kind of want to look up the board, and I think that you're going to agree with me on this based on some red lettering. But Jalen Brunson is in the top 20, and man, was he good the final month or two of last season, and incredible during the playoffs, and solidified himself as one of the best point guards in the NBA. He did it all while the team wasn't healthy, and now they're healthy. I just different reasoning, but similar to LeBron, I'm not taking Jalen Brunson in the second round. So somebody else can take him if they want. I think he's more of a third, maybe even fourth round guy to me. I think probably I'd feel comfortable taking him in the third. But I mean, like, what was he averaging? 30 plus points per game down the stretch, which inflated his numbers for the full season. But that was no Julius Randle. OG Anunoby was out for a good bit. They've added in Mikal Bridges as well. So Jalen Brunson's still going to play plenty of minutes. It's Tom Thibodeau. He's still going to score. Like, he's going to be good. But to take him in the top 20 where did he finish last season? He finished 29th, like just inside the top 30, looking at Basketball Monster. Played 77 games. It's like, could he do some of those things again? Sure. But I don't see him averaging almost 29 points and almost 7 assists per game just because of the amount of talent around him.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% on board with you on this one. I would say even more so than the first because I do feel like you're now taking Brunson at his absolute apex. He's a super fun fantasy player, but like you said, last year he did most of his damage when the other guy taking a lot of shots on the team was Dante DiVincenzo. It was Brunson. The last 2 months last year, Brunson took almost 24 shots a game and 7 free throw attempts. And then it was DiVincenzo at 16, Josh Hart around 11. And then when OG was healthy for like 8 games in there, he was taking about 11 shots per ball game as well. No Randall, no Bridges. You're just going to add bodies back. It gets more cluttered. And so if you look more at like what was Brunson before even Randall went down, he was more mid to late 30s, close to 40. Maybe he has taken a step forward from there. And this is one, by the way, that I think you, me, us, we're going to take heat on because he was so incredible down the stretch, and people see him there and they're like, "Oh, Jalen Brunson, he's an absolute lock." But what folks don't realize is that for as awesome, and like this is going to be some serious nitpicking level stuff on the show, so please, folks, don't interpret this the wrong way. He doesn't do much defensively, and he really doesn't rebound basically at all. And it's these little things that you kind of don't notice because He was averaging 30 some odd points a game over the last 2 months last year. He was at 31 points a game and 7 to 8 assists and 3 3-pointers. And he was doing it on a great free throw percent and a frankly pretty good field goal percent because of how good he is around the rim for a small dude. You just don't notice that he never blocks a shot. Fine, okay, he's a guard. You don't expect him to, but never. Like he had like 2 blocks in 2 months. The steals are low-ish. So there's these things that make it almost impossible for him to get higher than 18, 19, 20, which again, 20th ranked dude is freaking good. So I don't want people to misinterpret what I'm saying here, but there's almost no chance for him to go above that. And so, and now apologies for my own monologue here, because this is actually another player I hadn't talked about all that much. Again, like, you're not going to ruin your team by taking Brunson at 20. He'll probably be in the 30s, so you miss by a round or whatever. Your team will be fine. But Noah, aren't we, again, talking to Noah Rubin at Noah Rubin 22, aren't we kind of looking for guys here, like you just talked about a minute ago, that you feel could actually be higher than where you're drafting them, but maybe aren't the world's biggest injury risk? Isn't that the kind of combo that we're hunting for in this range?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's in my drafting philosophy, something I've kind of, I guess, taken away from Adam King, just like doing drafts and podcasts with him. Just he always like talks about, okay, are you drafting this guy at his ceiling? I'm like, like that's a good point. Like if everybody gets hurt again, Jalen Brunson could be like a top 20 guy. And like, but I really do think that would be his ceiling. I'm not seeing him. Granted, if everybody gets hurt and he has to score 35 a game, then like sure, top 15 is realistic. But like, I mean, Tom Thibodeau's known for jokingly driving knees into the ground and like everybody getting hurt, but like that could also be Brunson. I think he's not an injury risk in the sense that he's an injury prone player, but if we're going to look at everybody else in that team could be hurt because Tom Thibodeau plays everybody 35 minutes per game, then technically the same thing could be applied for Brunson. But that aside, and the more, I guess things that actually have a little bit of substance behind it other than maybe somebody gets hurt, like, yeah, I think that Brunson's ceiling may not even be a top 20 player in 9-cat leagues, but you're right. It's the hype of this guy is better in real life than he is in fantasy. And he just showed that in the playoffs, and it was a lot of fun to watch. Mm-hmm. So maybe that helps a little bit. If you're looking for the fun factor of somebody that's fun to watch, it is fun to watch him play basketball. Aside from some of the flopping stuff that I think everybody in the league does now, except Kyrie. But
yeah, they've done a better job of cracking down on it a little bit, although some of it slips through the cracks. The numbers, by the way, on Brunson for the final 15 games last year are so absolutely ridiculous that I think that may answer the question of why this is happening. Over the Knicks' final 15 games, Jalen Brunson attempted 26 shots per game. I don't even think we have the time on this podcast to go try to find out the last time a player took 26 shots a game for an entire season. I don't even know that it's ever happened, at least not in modern basketball history. You go back a few decades, maybe you'll be able to find it. But like, I'm showing a little bit of his Yahoo game log on the YouTube screen for folks that are watching. The final 6 games of the year, his field goal attempts were 28, 32, 24, 23, 25, and 30. Lest we forget his 61-point game against San Antonio on March 29th, when he took 47 field goal attempts. These are things that, frankly, are just not going to happen with Randall and Bridges and Anunoby back. It's not a sustainable number of attempts because he'll just run out of gas. So, yeah, we keep having to sort of cover our butts here and say this is not a player we dislike. We just dislike him at 20. So I don't know, man. The magic of podcasting. People hear us saying we don't like him at this spot, and then they assume that means we don't want Jalen Brunson. I'll happily have Jalen Brunson on every one of my fantasy teams, but I don't want to take him in the next round. And it sounds like that's probably where you'd want him as well, in the 3rd instead of the 2nd. Am I reading you right?
Yeah, and I think if I got into an actual draft and was looking at the names around him, there's probably still a handful of guys in the 3rd round that I would take over him. So, but yeah, probably late 3rd round to me. and it would depend on some of my first and second round pick as well. Because I mean, if we can just transition to talking about somebody else that maybe goes in that third round range, if you're fine with that,
Yeah.
if
Let's
you want to
bounce.
spend more time, let's do it. And you actually kind of mentioned him earlier, but I'll kind of lump two guys in here together. LaMelo Ball and Jaren Jackson Jr. are 29 and 30, and I think both of those guys were going first and second round last year. They have more upside to me than Brunson, and I think that there are reasons to be a little bit concerned. Maybe Brunson, like we were talking about with LeBron, feels a little bit safer just off the sense that he's not going to do what he did at the end of last year, but he's still going to be very good. And LaMelo's had all the injury issues, and Jaren Jackson Jr. is coming off a poor season. But specifically with Jaren Jackson, I'm expecting him to be much better in fantasy than he was this year. I think if you were following along last year with Memphis and trying to, cipher through all of the injury issues and the random players that were suiting up for them, Jaren Jackson was playing a very different role than he did the year before when he was a first-round fantasy player. So I'm expecting the blocks to go back up, the shot attempts to go back down, the field goal percentage to go back up, maybe the points drop a little bit. Hopefully the rebounds can get over 6 per game, because no, he's not a great rebounder, and it's actually kind of a liability to have a big that is such a poor rebounder. But I think that the blocks will go back up, which will make him a much better fantasy option than LaMelo. Look, if he's healthy, he's going to be better in fantasy than Jalen Brunson, in my humble opinion. And obviously, that is a massive if, and a lot of people are going to be scared off by him. But this is something that I've heard Matt Lawson bring up before, and I think I've referenced it more often than I've seen Matt talk about it, just because I loved it so much. But LaMelo talked about heading into last season, after having ankle issues the year before, that he was going to start wearing ankle braces. And I think he started to at the beginning of the year and then ditched them, ended up hurting his ankles again. So it's like, okay, if he comes out wearing ankle braces and takes it like seriously, wears them the whole season, you're like, okay, like he's really trying to avoid these ankle issues and really wants to be great. Then like we'll see the results. If he comes out and doesn't wear ankle braces, then sure, he may still not injure his ankles, but it makes you a little bit more worried. Like, how has he not learned his lesson yet? We all have, and maybe we haven't learned our lesson yet if we're still drafting him at that point. So a lot of it just depends on this young guy just taking a step in, I guess, I mean, really you call it maturity, just in the sense that he's ready to be the franchise player and turn things around in Charlotte, because it hasn't been pretty since he got there. But if he's on the court, he's going to outplay his ADP, and he might outplay it by a couple of rounds.
Yeah, he's LaMelo is one of those guys that is extraordinary to watch. And I know that like the eye test, we joke about what we can take away from a box score versus eye test or whatever. LaMelo Ball eye test is really cool. He throws passes simply faster than everybody else in the NBA, other than, the truly elite point guards. LeBron throws passes that are 1,000 miles an hour. Before Chris Paul looked like he was moving in molasses, he had some pretty sweet passes. LaMelo has that fastball that a lot of guys don't have, and it's actually one of the reasons why I didn't think Devin Booker had any chance to get to 8 assists last year. Was not so much because I don't like, Devin Booker. I just didn't think that he had the passing game. He got up to 7, so it was a little bit of pie in my face, but not completely. The guys that throw those extra gear passes, you can see that they have the opportunity to really kind of break the bank in a category in a way that other guys simply can't. But like you said with LaMelo, I mean, Dan Titus was on the show on Thursday. He mentioned that when the next Yahoo board comes out, LaMelo's probably a guy that's going to be jumping up 7 to 10 spots in it. So let me ask you this now very complicated follow-up question. Where are you comfortable taking this shot? Because in the third round, I am 1,000% with you. This is like ultimate. He and Kawhi going somewhere in this range. Kawhi even later in some drafts. Like this is the easiest choice on earth, because like if they're hurt for some number of games, who cares? Because they're putting up per game numbers that are through the roof. But how pricey can you go with Ball? Would you take the shot in the second round, or is that too scary now?
I'm trying to remember, because I've done a handful of mocks, and I know I took him early third round, like on the turn, and was considering taking him in the second in that same mock. I think late second is where I'd take him. Yeah, like I think if you're able to, I mean, it doesn't really matter who you go in the first round, but for example, if you were to go like a Jokic or a Luka, and then you're able to pair them with LaMelo on the turn back around, whether it be late second or early third, like, you're gonna have a ton of fun and a lot of success with assists this year. So yeah, I think late second is probably the earliest I would take him, just because we have to have the reality check of, even if we're hoping that he's healthy, and there's certainly a chance, like there's also certainly a chance that he isn't. So I feel like late second is probably the earliest I would take him, just because we do have to kind of recognize that the ankle issues have been there the past 2 seasons, and if he's not playing, he's not helping. So
let's pivot back to JJJ for a minute, because he's,
yeah,
I think, the only name you've said so far that I'm a little bit scared and may go the other way on. Are you at all worried? And I don't want any of these questions to come off harsh. I just want to like get a little bit deeper on it. With JJJ, one of the things that Matt Smith talked about on a show earlier this summer was having guys that have a lot of their value sort of clustered in one statistical category. And Jaren Jackson is kind of that guy. And we saw it last year where he went from 3+ blocks per game down to 1.5. And yeah, other things happened as well. He scored more. His field goal percent was worse. There were things that sort of like balanced out a little bit. But the one thing that was the true falling off the precipice was the blocks, and his value dropped by 3.5 rounds as a result. How confident are you that the blocks do come back? Because that's what worries me. Because if they don't come back and his usage goes down with guys coming back, it could potentially go the other way. The low floor, I think, is what scares me with him.
yeah, I think it is something that, like, it definitely exists. Like the idea of the low floor, like what if the blocks just aren't there? Like it's possible, because that would definitely impact his value negatively. I'm just pretty confident that that's going to go back up. I'm not saying it's going to go back to 3 per game 100%, like with 100% certainty, but I think that's definitely attainable, just off the sense that last year it was okay. It was an opportunity, one, for him to improve more offensively, show what he can do, just get the experience of being the focal point of the offense, just for, if that happens to happen again in the playoffs or late in the regular season where John Morant's missing time or Desmond Bane's missing time. And he has that experience. He's done it before. But it's also the fact that beginning of the year, when they were trying to win games, knowing, hey, John Morant's going to be back in 25 games, like, we kind of need Jaren Jackson Jr. out on the floor. We can't have him getting in foul trouble. If he's in foul trouble, like, we're hosed as a team. Like, there's no way we win. So I think it was something that he had to be careful with, was the sense that you can't necessarily go for every single block, because if he gets in foul trouble, the team's done. So with John Morant back and with Desmond Bane back and Marcus Smart healthy, and they added Zach Edey down low as well, like, Jaren Jackson Jr., I think, is going to have more of an opportunity to spread his wings defensively than he did last season. So I'm expecting those blocks to go back up. Honestly, I think his numbers will just look more similar to what they did when he was a first-round guy. And yes, I think if you're looking at it with, okay, it's a 9-cat league, and yes, it says he's a first-round guy, but a lot of that is tied up in the blocks. So, like, how much is he really impacting other categories? And that's not something that fits your team well. Then, yeah, I think that maybe you would want to look at taking him a little later or avoid him in the second or third round. But if you're looking for those blocks, like, sure, he's elite with those. But I think also, this may be just me being a little bit hopeful, is the sense that he was able to improve last season on offense just because he was forced into the opportunity. And then you add in all this other talent that hopefully the offense doesn't go away too much. So he averaged, his points went up 4 per game last year. I'm hoping he can keep it around 20. Can his threes go up anymore? I think it's a lot of maybe being a little bit optimistic here, with hoping that Jaren Jackson Jr. is able to kind of combine his last 2 seasons to be an elite fantasy player. But also, I mean, I think the idea of Wemby and Chet Holmgren has kind of almost made people not value what Jaren Jackson Jr. does as much, because they're like, oh, we can get these guys that block 2 or 3 shots, hit 2 threes, but these guys also do step backs and stuff like that. So it's fun. But Jaren Jackson Jr. obviously doesn't do that, but there still isn't a ton of players in the league that have his diverse skill sets. So if you really want to, lean into a super punt in a head-to-head league, probably not a roto league, but in a head-to-head league where you're getting Wemby in round 1 and Jaren Jackson Jr. in round 2 or 3, you probably win blocks and every single week.
Yeah, I was gonna say probably.
Probably.
Yeah,
Maybe a guarantee that you win block every week.
you might be okay in that regard.
Yeah.
Noah, we're talking to Noah Rubin at Noah Rubin 22. We're coming towards the end of our time. Two things. First thing is promo time. What you got going on? Where can folks find you? What are you working on? What do you want to let people know about?
Ooh, still episodes of the Tank Me Later podcast coming out. You mentioned at the beginning for Fantasy Basketball International. Probably one this week, and then when I get back home, I'm planning to do more, like a few per week until the season starts. And then when the season starts, it'll slow down a lot. But hopefully some dynasty mocks. I have some other dynasty related ideas that I want to do coming up, and then getting into some redraft content a few weeks before the season starts. And then we're starting to work on our draft guide over at RotoWorld.
Nice.
I don't know exactly when that's coming out, but we are going to be putting a lot of hours into that over the next month or so to get some good articles and player and team little blurbs out that everybody can take a look at. I think it's going to be formatted a little bit differently this year than it was in the past, so it should be pretty fun. But that's pretty much what my life is going to consist of for the next month and a half, is the draft guide and occasionally a podcast.
You sound equal parts excited and terrified.
It's always so fun to do everything, but it's like a daunting task looking ahead of it. 'Cause I'm like, oh, I have all these things I need to get done, and all these things I want to do, but I have to get these done before I can do this. And then I start doing it. It's fun stuff. Like, it's
Yeah.
writing, talking about basketball. Like, I don't want to complain about work. It's so fun.
I totally agree. It is like, it's a lot. It's a lot of work to keep track of everything and to line it all up. And the only thing that gets me through is I use my email inbox as my to-do list. And then you can just sort of like check them off one thing at a time. And I have a scratch pad where I'm like writing down the things that pop into my head. But I'm an old man now, and I can't remember the things that I'm supposed to do. So that's part of it. Did I cut you off before you had a couple of the names? I don't want to go deep on anybody else, but if you have a lightning round, we could do that now, and then I'll get you back to your midday. If there's
Without
nobody else,
going
that's fine.
deep on anybody, I don't know. I think we should just call it, because I'm
Okay,
afraid that if we open up a can, I'm afraid we're just gonna take way too long. So
we'll go a dozen minutes on each. That's
Exactly.
fair. That's a beautiful list. Let me take JJJ off the screen for the folks that are watching on YouTube. We're not talking about him anymore. What I forgot to do was write down every name that we covered here, but it was LeBron, it was Jalen Brunson, it was LaMelo Ball, and JJJ. Were those the four? Did I forget a fifth?
No, those are the four. You
four.
said you couldn't remember things anymore, but clearly your memory is intact. It's working great.
As my father used to say, mind like a steel sieve. That's where I'm at right now. Noah, thank you so much for making appearance numero tres on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. You are once again tied with the league lead in that department. And your per game stats are also, in addition to your totals, they are through the roof. So thank you, Noah.
Roto leagues or head to head.
I know that's it. I mean, that's another strategy. We're going to have some strategy shows coming up here in the next little bit. So we'll get Noah back on for those. We'll do some dynasty stuff with you. We'll have some new boards to cover at some point here. You can bet your butt that Noah will be back on the pod soon. But seriously, dude, thank you so much for carving out time again today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So I don't actually know. I should go back and look and find out what it looks like when I pause the recording, have a lovely end of show chat with the guest, remove them, and then immediately start talking here. I don't know if StreamYard is going to do like a wipe or a fade, or like, does their face just poof disappear in an abrupt and jarring cut? Maybe I should get better at video technology, but at least for the audio folks, I can splice that together in a few seconds. Y'all guys get the good audio. YouTubers, I don't know what the hell you guys get. Anyway, big thank you to Noah Rubin at Noah Rubin 22. He is, again, the pride of RotoWorld Fantasy Basketball and FBI. His show, Tank Me Later, is on the FBI podcast network. He's been punching around in fantasy circles for a while. Noah's just a flat out good dude. And, I like to make all these jokes about who's been on the show the most. It's not that I don't want it to seem like there are other people that I like. Noah's the guy I like the most because he's been on 3 times. But I like Noah a lot, and that's the reason he's been on 3 times. I got to get there are a few people that I haven't been able to schedule yet, and I got to get them in the mix. But I've knocked out probably like 85 to 90% of the folks that I wanted to get on here. Matt Smith is probably about to have his next kid, so he's likely to fall behind some of the other ones. But thinking back to June, I got to get my buddy Keith back on the show. I haven't talked to him in a while. I'm looking at the list right now. Jacob Dunn coming up later this week. That'll likely be tomorrow. Hey, let's segue into what's coming up on the show. This feels like the right time for that. Coming up on tomorrow's show, that is the Jacob Dunn episode. He is a points league expert. He's going to be giving us his points league targets from the Yahoo board as we continue the exploration of the Yahoo numbers. And if the board changes, great, because then we'll have even more stuff to talk about. So regardless of what it looks like, that's what's coming up on tomorrow's show. Thursday, Yahoo Mocks Open. We'll be doing at least one of those, maybe more than one, and those will be available as shows. The plan for me is to get 3 to 5 mocks out weekly. And one thing that I did last year was we were doing 2 to 3 mocks on the Ethos channel last year. Now here on Old Man Squad, we'll be doing at least that. But one of the changes that I'd like to make is I was kind of looking back and seeing what other folks do and what the community was asking for was to have more varied settings and varied starting spots. So like I'll try to do a mock, drafting in 1 through 12. I'll try to do a 14-teamer, a 10-teamer, so you get kind of one on each side of that. We'll try to do an 8-cap mock. We'll try to do a points league mock, things like that. So you get the variety pack as opposed to me just like hoping that enough people join a 9-category league, and we can get that out to you guys as well. Dan Palio on Friday, most likely. That should be a lot of fun. Also, again, as Noah brought up, I think maybe it wasn't mentioned on the show. My buddy Adam King, who we talked to yesterday on the pod, his new show, Between Two Dans, launching on the Old Man Squad Sports Network. That's either today or tomorrow. It'll be Adam, Dan Palio, who we just talked about, also Dan Titus. I'll be one of the Dans coming up on that one. There was a secret Dan, as Adam mentioned as well, that will also pop in from time to time. And that one should be a lot of fun. I'm going on record right now as when I'm one of the Dans on that show, I plan on making it extraordinarily weird. That's my goal, is to make it like Between Two Ferns, but with Dans instead of ferns. Quick recap here from this show with Noah. He felt like LeBron was going a little bit too high, which I understand that. He felt like Jalen Brunson was definitely going too high. I am very much on board with that one. I think that he was looking at my list, and I think I may have had Brunson color-coded as too high. So he knew we were going to agree on that one. JJJ, he's more bullish on than I am. So that was an interesting one where we got to sort of, not butt heads necessarily, but express where I had the concerns and where he did not. And then LaMelo Ball, who we all are just praying stays at 29 so we can scoop him up in the 3rd round. But unfortunately, he probably will go a little sooner. But Noah was able to give us a range that he was looking at, which is more in that like 23 to 26 zone. I don't think he goes too much before that because just hearing about ankle braces to me doesn't completely alleviate my concerns. Like I need to see it. And frankly, if I draft LaMelo in the late 2nd, early 3rd, or late 3rd or whatever, I might try to move him after 3 weeks of health. Something to think about. Again, you can find Noah on Twitter at NoahRubin22. I am on Twitter at Dan Vespris, and the network is at Old Man Squad. That feed will follow you back. It's up and over 1,000, which is super awesome. Thank you guys for getting us there. Again, it will follow you back over about 24 to 48 hours after you follow it. That, again, is at Old Man Squad. Please do like, rate, and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up. That's a big deal. It pops us into the recommended feed. Subscribe however you're taking in the show. And especially folks on Apple right now, need those 5-star reviews. We are 5% to where we were on the old show on that one. And I realized, 7-8 years of the old show versus 2 and change months of this one. It's going to take a minute, but whatever help you guys can provide is very much necessary. Also, to those that asked for me to try to do something on the YouTube side so people knew generally when we talked about things, I don't really have the time or a producer to go back and do a bunch of timestamps. But if you're watching the show, you can buzz through really fast. And I tried to put up a graphic or a website with the player's name that we were talking about. So you'll kind of know that way, oh, this is when they get to LeBron and so on and so forth. So I'm going to try to do better as kind of workarounds as opposed to, trying to conduct an interview with a guest, trying to also mark down timestamps, things like that. I'm just not that good. Later on today, we will have a second episode of the show where we'll likely get into either the 76 to 100 range of the Yahoo board or a couple of really interesting draft results were submitted, so we can break those down as well. Have a great few hours of this delightful Tuesday morning. I think we're 9 weeks from the start of the NBA season. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, we're exactly 9 weeks out, ladies and gentlemen. 63 days. Put them on the board. Anyway, see you in a few hours. A lot of shows over that stretch. Later for now.